Good morning, folks. We are in the book of Genesis, chapter 19. We are going to do our best to finish up this lesson today. This has been a long lesson, difficult to finish. So if you'll join me in Genesis 19, as soon as I get there, then we will continue our study of the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah and the life of Lot. And if you hold your finger there in Genesis 19, also like we've been doing for the past 3 weeks, find Romans chapter 1 and mark that place. A lot of what we're going to study today comes from Romans chapter 1, because as we've said before, just in case somebody happens to come in the middle of the sermon and they don't understand what we're doing, we're studying Genesis and we're reading from Romans. Genesis 19 begs the question, how in the world can a city, how can our people get so wicked that God would destroy them? And Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plains became so wicked that God destroyed them with fire and brimstone. And Romans chapter 1 answers the question, how can a place get that bad? How can people become so wicked? And so we're studying Romans chapter 1 along with this study. All right? I'm going to pick up where we left off. This is the section we are studying the 10, I guess you call them the 10 types of sins, or the 10 sins of Sodom. Or the reasons that the sin of Sodom was so grievous to God. And we studied about the popularity of the sin in Genesis 19 verse 4 last week, that the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people of every quarter, they came to Lot's door and wanted him to hand over the men they thought that were actually angels. And I gave you a quote from a pastor who said that a nation is in a terrible state when the sins of Sodom, which is mainly pride and homosexuality, are being promoted to its children. And pride is the motto word used for the gay movement, the homosexual movement, gay pride. And it's pride against God, pride against rebellion against God. We also looked at the publicness of their sin. Every aspect of their homosexuality they make very public, just as it is in our day. And as I heard a preacher say years ago, if God doesn't judge the world today, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah because of the wickedness of this world today. And not just the lost world, but the wickedness of a lot of believers has become so bad that, and God doesn't apologize for destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. He did it justly and righteously because of the wickedness there. And as Isaiah 3 verse 9 says, they declare their sin, and as Sodom, they hide it not. It's very public, very open. There's nothing up there. Thank you for telling. I'm flipping the screen and it's supposed to be working. All right, give me just a second. Let me correct that, and I can fix it real quick here. I know how to do this now. I learned it. Oh, yay. I figured out what's wrong. If I can just remember which one of these it is. How about that? Sorry about that. Thank you for telling me that. So anyway, now let's keep going. Now we start the new part of this study, the 10 things about the sins of Sodom. So we talked about the popularity of the sin, how it was popular throughout the whole population of the city, and the publicness, so it's not hidden, it's public. Now we get into number 3, which is the perversity of their sin. Okay? And Oh, I'm sorry, I mixed up my outline. But anyway, you'll figure it out. Here, the perversity of their sin. JJ's laughing because she knows where I am. I've already messed up. Now we're caught up. I've caught up with myself, and hopefully you'll catch up with me too. Now that I've mixed things up. All right. The perversity of the sin. The 10 reasons we call it perverse. And that is exactly what the sin of homosexuality is. It's a perverse lifestyle. It's perverse in its wickedness. Number one, the sin is an abomination, and the appearance of this sin of homosexuality, and homosexuality is a sin. It's not just a lifestyle. It is a choice that people make. And I'm going to prove to you in a few minutes that people are not born that way, no matter what the world tells you today. The Bible says they're not born that way. It's a choice that people make to be homosexual. And there may be tendencies, because the tendency to sin is in all of us. But some people may have the tendency to be that way because of something in their life, some choice they're making, or the things they're feeding their mind and participating in. But it's not because God let them be born that way. Recently watched one of those YouTube videos, and I heard this young lady ask, "Why did God let me be born a lesbian?" And she wasn't criticizing God. She was thankful that she was a lesbian, and she said, "But I'm arguing with you that I am born that way. Why would God let me be born that way if it wasn't God's plan?" God didn't let anybody be born lesbian or queer. God says we all have a choice to make. We all make choices. So the appearance of this lifestyle or sin of homosexuality is an abomination as well. These are scriptures that we read last week, and we went through this, and it was pretty heavy, serious stuff, and I won't go back through it because I've already covered it once. Now, the masculinization of women and the feminization of men is a repulsive way of living to Almighty God. It's not just repulsive, it's an abomination. It is right and biblical, and I don't apologize for saying this, I say it very clearly. It's right and biblical to maintain a clear distinction in dress, that's the appearance we're talking about, between the sexes. It's more important than ever in a day of gender confusion and the pressure put on young people concerning that. When kids go to school today, they are pressured with these things. Just read an article this week, a brand new case. There's cases coming up in the courts every day in our country, but all throughout the world now. It used to just be in the Western countries. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And just a brand new case this week where a school teacher took first grade kids, 6-year-old kids, and was and I believe it was in Arizona, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it's in one of our states here, and this is happening everywhere, not just in one state here or there. It's not just in California. It's not just in New York. It's everywhere. And this teacher started off the school year with her first grade students by reading them two books, first graders. She sat and read these storybooks to these kids, teaching them that one of the books was about a little girl who was born so-and-so, Ginger or whatever her name was, and but she realized that she was born, that they misidentified her when she was born. Her parents thought she was a girl, but she's really a boy. And it encourages these first grade children, the story does, to examine your thoughts. And if you start feeling like you should have been the opposite sex, then you need to pursue that. First grade kids. Both these books were along the same line. And one of the little kids came home and told the parents about it. And the dad went to talk to the teacher, and the teacher said, "You have no business questioning me about that. You have no authority over what I do in my classroom. You have no business telling me I can't teach these kids that, because I have that law, I have that freedom." He went to the school board. The school board said, "You have no authority to tell this teacher she can't read those books to those kids." He said, "But that's my little kid in there." He said, the school board said in the school board meeting, public school board meeting, "You have no say-so over what we do in our classrooms. We teach the kids, you don't. You're not the professionals, we are." So he took it to court. He sued the school, sued the school board, and the court threw it out. This week, the court said, "You have no authority in the school. You don't have any say-so." So, of course, he took his kid out, put him in private school, and that's what people are doing all over the place with good reason. With good reason. When the government says that parents have no rights, no say-so about their children, there's something terribly wrong about that. And there's a lot of pressure over on kids today about this. Now, we covered this last week, so let me go through it real quick here. We're going to start. This is number 2. I don't have them numbered up there, but according to Old Testament law, there were very few sins or actions that were deserving of sin or deserving of death. And Leviticus 20 verse 13 tells us that the law of God says that homosexuals deserve to die. Now, let me stop there and say this. Homosexuals do not deserve to die at the hand of the church or government today. That's not what our role is. And we live in the age of grace. But grace does not mean that you just live any way you want and get away with it, that God ignores it. Grace means that God is willing to forgive and to put people on the right track. But in the Old Testament law, God exhibited and showed grace to many people in the Old Testament. But the law of God shows us how God feels about this and what God says about this and how God established certain rules and laws in nature and in human nature and in the human race. So only certain laws were worthy of death, and homosexuality was one of them. And we use the law today to point people to Christ, to point people to God, say that we can't please God by ourselves, and we should always remember that the use of referring to the law today is not so that we are bound by that law, but to show us how God sees certain sins and how God sees our life and our lives and how we are to respond to that. So just some scriptures about that. I read them last week, so I won't read them again today. Okay? Now, not only is homosexuality a sin that the Old Testament said deserved death, and I repeat, that's not our duty, and that's not how God sees it today. God will judge each individual when they stand before Him in eternity. But in this life, that's not what we're about. It's not what God expects of us, and it would be wrong of us to consider a homosexual being worthy of death today. Okay, everybody is worthy of death. Everybody's worthy of hell because we're sinners. But God says He will forgive and cleanse every sin, including the sin of homosexuality. But the sin of homosexuality is an unclean sin. Unclean doesn't just mean dirty, even though that includes dirty, but it has more meaning than that. Homosexuality is unclean morally. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 24, the first part of the verse talks about the lust of their own hearts. The lust of their own hearts. We're in Romans chapter 1. If you've got that place safe right there, look at verse 24. Wherefore God also gave them up to the uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. So it's an unclean sin. Unclean in the sense of spiritually unclean, morally unclean. It's unclean physically. It is a sin that spreads disease, and the sin of homosexuality is physically unclean because it spreads disease throughout this world, and it's a sin of the flesh that is filthy in God's eyes, and he calls it an unclean sin. Not only is it unclean, but it's dishonorable. Let me show you what I mean. Look at verse 24 again, Romans chapter 1, the second part of the verse. Let us read the whole verse. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. To dishonor. It's dishonorable. It's dishonorable. It is not to be honored. It's not to be respected. I respect people, but we have no business as Christians respecting the sin of homosexuality. No respect for it. It is not honorable. It doesn't deserve to be honored. And people may demand to be honored who practice it, but that doesn't mean you have to do that. No one can demand you and command you to go against what you believe concerning God and God's Word. And if they do, they're wrong. You need to stand on God's Word no matter what it costs or no matter what happens. The word dishonor means to maltreat or treat shamefully. It's a shameful thing, all right? To treat shamefully. In contrast, God says the life of a married man and woman together is honorable. Their relationship is honorable. It is something to be treasured, and their intimacy together is a wonderful thing that God has blessed. God has blessed. And he says the marriage bed is an honorable thing. And that's not the marriage of today's world, but the marriage of the Bible. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4. Hebrews 13 and verse 4. Reminds us that homosexuality is self-abuse. And Hebrews 13:4, is talking about the marriage bed being honorable. But homosexuality, according to God's law, and according to Romans chapter 1, verse 24, homosexuality is self-abuse. It is so dishonorable. It's the practice of abusing self. And you say, well, if I want to abuse myself, that's my business. If you're a Christian, it's not. If you're lost, you'll have to answer to God for that after you die. And people do answer for it even in this life. But a Christian has no right to do that. We're not to dishonor and self-abuse our bodies because it belongs to the Lord. It's to be used for the Lord. And we're wrong if we use our bodies in sinful, perverse ways in this life, because it is the abuse of what God's given us. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9. I'm just speeding through. I'm trying to move quickly through this because I've still got a long way to cover, and I want to try to finish it today. Homosexuality is self-defilement. Self-defilement. Self-defilement is putting it a lot mildly, but 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10 and 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 9, and as we read in Romans chapter 1 verse 24, how they dishonor their own bodies between themselves. All right, they dishonor their own bodies between themselves. I'm trying to decide how deep to go in this. I'm trying to not go too deep. Okay, you adults know what I'm talking about. All right. It is a dishonorable sin also because it is a vile sin. If you look at verse 26, Romans chapter 1, verse 26, the first part of the verse, for this cause God gave them up unto what kind of affections? vile affections. Vile affections. All right? Not only that, homosexuality is an unnatural sin. An unnatural sin. If you continue reading in Romans 1:26, gave them up to vile affections, for even their women did change, notice that, change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men leaving, we're going to come back to those two words, change and leave are important here. The natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was meat. That last phrase we're going to study a lot in just a minute. That is extremely important, the last part of verse 27. Okay? But we'll leave it for now because I want to draw your attention to the other things that we're studying here. It's an unnatural sin. Homosexuality is not natural. It's unnatural. There's nothing natural about it. It is extremely, it's as opposite from being natural as you can get. It is absolutely unnatural, okay? It goes against nature. Look at verse 26 with me. And you say, well, people were born that way. They can't help it. This is where I'm going to prove to you people are not born that way. It's a choice. God says in verse 26, for this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even the women did change the natural use. Changed. It changed from natural to unnatural. Against nature. All right? They changed. They weren't born that way. They changed. Verse 27. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman. The natural relationship between a man and woman. They left that. That's the way they're supposed to be, but they left it. They made a choice to change. The claim that people are born that way is it's also debunked by scientific evidence, not just what the Bible says, even though what the Bible says is enough. It's all we need. But there was a study done. I'm going to read you the quote I took from an article, okay? And let me tell you where this comes from. This comes from an article from an organization called AmericanVision.org. And it's a study of twin people, the twins. Let me read it to you. Perhaps the most powerful line of evidence found in twin studies, since identical twins have identical genetics, it would follow that if one twin was homosexual, the other would also be homosexual 100% of the time. But in this study, they found even in our perverted world, this was not done by Christians, this was done by the world, the lost world. They studied this and they found that both twins are homosexual in less than 15% of cases they studied. Less than 15%. 15% is high. That's very high. Because if you study how many people in the population of our country are open homosexual, the number's climbing, of course. Transgender is higher than that. It's people claiming to be an opposite sex and all this craziness and wickedness. But it's only less than 15% of identical twins, not just twins, but identical twins, less than 15% were both homosexual. By choice, of course, but if they say if you were born that way, then why wouldn't both twins be that way all the time? Because it's a choice. Make a choice. All right. Homosexuality is a lustful sin. All right. I hear queers talking about how they love each other. They talk about loving each other. And I'll make a statement I've made many times, and I hope you believe this from the God's Word, that people who aren't saved don't even really understand what true love is, just like they don't understand what real forgiveness is. And A lot of Christians still don't get it the way they should, but loving somebody else is something we choose to do. It's not something we fall into. It's not something you do because you can't help yourself. It's because you choose to love somebody, because love is giving yourself to somebody else. It's not getting from somebody else. That's not love. It's giving. And when you love somebody, you give yourself. You sacrifice yourself. You give yourself to someone else. And you do what they want more than you do what you want. You do what they want. So, but the homosexual people, for the most part, and I can't make a blanket statement because I don't know all of them. All right? But I do know that the sin of homosexuality and the lifestyle of homosexuality is a very selfish lifestyle. Very selfish. And it's filled with lust, because that's what lust is. Lust is about me, not the other person. Lust is about the person lusting. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Look at verse 27, Romans 1, verse 27. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Burned. It's inflamed. It's set on fire. It's a rage of lust. It's something that symbolizes being out of control, uncontrollable. All right? Did you know that it's not uncommon? Which means it is common for this to happen. It's not uncommon for males, I won't say men, okay, I'm going to say males on purpose, in the United States, I'm not talking about other countries because I don't know about, but the study I read said that males in the United States who say they are queer will have as many as or over, in some cases, 300 partners in a year. Not in a lifetime, in a year. Why in the world would disease spread through the homosexual community? Oh, I have no idea. Maybe that has a little to do with it. Maybe. Out of control lust. Raging. On fire. Lust that's out of control. Remember, that's 300 in a year, not in a lifetime. 300. 300 in a lifetime is extreme. But 300 a year? Out of control. The book of Jude is a very small little one-chapter book that has some of the strongest language in it of any book in the Bible. I guess that's why it just needed one chapter. God gave us one chapter, and verse 7, Jude verse 7 says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Jude 7. You ought to read it. You ought to mark it. You ought to underline it. Make note of it. Jude 1. I put Jude 1 because people just naturally say which chapter. All right, let's keep going. The sin of homosexuality is an obscene sin. Obscene. The word obscene usually has something to do with being unseemly, means shameful, indecent. Shameful, indecent. It refers to a shameful or disgraceful act, and obscenity is certainly a key word in that definition. It is an obscene sin. The last part of verse 27 Romans 1:27, men with men working that which is unseemly. Working that which is unseemly. It is an unseemly, shameful, indecent, obscene sin. Let me read you a paragraph from another preacher. We're certainly living in a day where the obscene is flaunted openly and brazenly for all to see. Immodesty, indecency, and immorality are displayed all around us in a society that has all but abandoned moral morality. I would only correct one thing the preacher said. He says all but abandoned. I would say it has been abandoned. I don't believe there's any restraint in the world society except what comes from the Holy Spirit working in people's hearts and the Word of God and Christians being in society. It's the only restraint there is. And most of the world ignores that, turning their back on it. Let's keep going. Here's an interesting word to put in this list. A delusional sin. Delusional. All right, look at verse 27. Notice carefully. Let me read the verse again, then you'll catch it, okay? Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. Their error, which was meat. We'll clarify that in just a minute. Error means wandering or straying about. If you look in the Strong's Concordance, that gives you every word in the Bible. Strong's Concordance gives you every word in the Bible, except the articles and things like that, like a or the. But these words are defined and given you scripture references for it in Strong's Concordance. Strong says to the error in this context means one led astray from the right way. One who was led astray from the right way. The same word, the same Greek word that is translated here, error, has also been translated in the New Testament as deceit and delusion. Deceit and delusion. Because that's what this error means. All right? Let's keep going. This disease-ridden sin, if you look at the very last part of verse 27, the last phrase, receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was me. The recompense. Okay? Recompense is an old English word that has a very strong meaning. It means their reward or their penalty. They get what they want. God gives them what they want. Gives them what they ask for. It's their reward. It's their penalty for this decision. The natural result of their sin pays them back for the choice they made. To recompense means you pay somebody back for the choice they've made. You pay it back to recompense. It's like when a person is trying to decide if they're going to do something wrong or not. And they say to themselves, well, I suppose I really shouldn't do this. But do it anyway. The reason they do that is because they know if they do it, it's going to have bad result. And these folks These people who make this choice in life, sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, have done this knowing what the result's going to be. The Old English word meet in this, M-E-E-T, that the recompense of their error, which was meat, they're being repaid for their choice, and it was meet that they get this, that they receive this. It's fitting, it's necessary, it's ordained by God's divine law. Okay? It has been ordained. It's fitting. It's not just here that we see the word meat used, but usually in the New Testament, when we find the word meat used in a sentence like this, it's talking about the result of sin. You get this because of your sin. That's why you're getting it. We don't use it that way in modern English, but in Old English, that's exactly how it was used. What are some of the recompense that has come upon homosexual community? Not just because the ripple effect, the effect of these problems have gone out into other parts of society as well. Other people are paying the price for the decision of this wickedness. We've got all kinds of STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, are rampant. When I was growing up, my wife and I, when we were growing up, and you folks understand, when we were growing up, we heard about STDs. I know during World War II, that was one of the big things that the military were trying to help soldiers with, because they were spreading sexually transmitted diseases all through the military because of the wickedness that was going on. But it's not just during wartime. Our country right now is filled with sexually transmitted diseases. Let me ask you something. I'm gonna be kind of gross a little bit and coarse, but nothing nasty. But I want to ask you a question. When you go to a public bathroom, do you fear touching everything? Are you a little bit nervous about, ladies?
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah.
When your children go into a public bathroom, are you a little bit nervous about them going in and touching something, and then next thing you know, they're going to touch their eyes, they're going to rub their nose, they're going to touch their mouth? Why? Because of this problem. Because of all the diseases that travel throughout the world. And that's not even sexually transmitted. There's no sexual contact going on. But you understand what I mean, and the implication that's here. It's a serious thing. I remember when we went to Tennessee a few weeks ago, and before our youngest daughter had her last baby, and she was in a situation where she couldn't take care of the boys well, so we offered to take them with us. And at that time, we had to make an emergency trip to Tennessee for my mom. And we made the trip, and we took some of the boys with us. How many did we take with us? I forgot.
4.
We took 4. That's how many there were at that time. We took all 4 with us. And I remember we stopped in rest areas and places for bathrooms. And when you take little toddlers and little kids into a bathroom, they touch everything. And I know at least 2 or 3 dozen times on the way to the bathroom and in the bathroom, I'm saying, don't touch that, 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 don't put your hands on that. And I know the old fellows in there in the bathrooms thought I was crazy, but they understood what I was doing. And it'll make you a nervous wreck. Because kids' fingers go right to the face, right to the mouth. The first thing they do, especially if they've just touched something nasty, they're going to put it in their mouth. Seems the natural thing to do. And I'm telling you what, it was nerve-wracking. And I wanted to tie their hands behind their back, and say, you can't do anything, don't touch anything. It was just scary. And, anyway, I've forgotten. Being a papo, I forgot about what the little kids do in public like that. But it can sure work on you. But folks, the reason we have good reason to fear is because of this spread of STDs, AIDS, HIV, whatever name you want to give it, and them. It's there. The fear is there, and the rest of the world suffers because of it. It's not limited to those who practice this immoral, this wicked sin of homosexuality. It's not limited because it spreads throughout the human race. So it is a disease-ridden sin. Now, I'm going to stop, mainly because I'm out of time. The second reason is because I'm entering into a new section, and I wanted to finish the whole chapter of Genesis 19 and the things that happened because of the sins of Sodom, but I can't because I'm out of time. Well, it's just going to drag out to another Sunday, I guess. That's okay. Folks, wait just a second. We have so much to be thankful for. We're living in the age of grace. But we have so much to be serious about when it comes to knowing God's Word. When you know the truth, that makes you accountable to obey it. And we know the truth about homosexuality, the sin, the lifestyle, the choice that people make. We know the truth. We know what God says about it. Now we have to believe it. That means reject the lies and false information that you're given by the medical world, by the media, by the government, by the world that we live in today. Christians have no business accepting those policies, those ideas, those false information that they're fed. Have no business, saying, "Well, that's okay, that's all right. I believe it's really not that bad." Be gracious and be kind and be understanding to homosexual people. Yes. Show them God's grace. Don't show them your favor because you agree with them, but show them Christ's love because God can help them and forgive them just like He has helped us and forgiven us. He can do the same for them. Don't treat them any differently than you would anybody else. But as a Christian, we have a responsibility to give them the gospel, just like we do everybody. So don't neglect that part of being a kind person. Don't neglect that, okay? Father, thank you so much for your word, for the truth. Help us, dear Father, to remember that we are accountable to you. We are stewards of your truth. We're stewards of your word. Please remind us every day to share it with others, to give it to others in every way we can, and to live it before others. In Jesus' name, amen.